our concern for the West. The fraud of multiculturalism and the growth of passive pluralism in the universities and the Western societies worried me about our future in Australia. I had a reason to worry. We had escaped the death sentence and were kindly granted a visa to live in Australia, but I saw our future at risk if the game of multiculturalism continued. Committed Muslims had been using it as a channel to enter and establish their Islamic law, Shari'a, in the West. I lived Islam as a radical and a committed Muslim and was aware of the plans committed Muslims had for Australia and all other Western communities. They come to the West to penetrate and change Western civilization until it collapses, giving way to Islamic rule. Not only was I aware of this plan, but had been a part of it back in Iran. This was not only the plan of Iranian radical Muslims, but the plan of all radical Muslims. The Ayatollah Khomeini was not the inventor of this Islamic plan. He learned this from the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood, the mother of terrorism in the world. It was terrifying to my family to see the establishment and the growth of their plans in the West. We could not sit idle and watch our new country tolerate the enemies of humanity without knowing their history and the root of their belief. We had not escaped the hostility of the pious Muslims with the intention of keeping quiet and allowing their zealous Muslim brothers to establish themselves in democratic Australia while progressively destroying this democracy as they had done in Islamic countries. It was shocking to us to hear and read that many people in the West believed that Islam carried the same values as other beliefs. They thought Islam was equally worthy of respect and Muslims did not need to assimilate into Western culture. More worrying to us was the common belief that no religion or culture in a pluralistic society had to be criticized since all were equal. People were losing their interest in distinguishing the difference between peaceful and terrorizing ideologies since everything was believed to be right and there was nothing to be called the best or absolutely true. You would be called unethical if you challenged Islam. Our children's brains were being filled in the schools and universities that it was a virtue to agree with everything. Therefore, not many people dared to take a stand against anything that Islamists were imposing on the society simply for the fear of offending someone. Islamists were also taking the silence and indifference as an opportunity to shelter themselves under the umbrella of this altruist notion and zealously started to fight people like us who wanted to expose their destructive plans. It was scary to see that many politicians in the West put their trust in these Islamist and mosque leaders asking their counsel in regard to their relationship with Muslim communities. This was happening in a time when even many moderate Muslim governments in Islamic countries avoided any consultation with radical Islamists unless they had no other choice, knowing it is unwise to give opportunity to the radicals. They were not aware that any time Islamists attain power, they kill anyone who is not with them or opposes them, no matter an ally or else. The Ayatollah Khomeini slaughtered some of his own friends who once helped him and even rescued him from death. I knew from Islamic sources and by practice that Islam not only was not compatible with democratic values, it had also instructions for the destruction of these values. According to Islam, Muslims have no right to fit themselves to the values of non-Muslims, but have to force or lead others to change and suit Islamic values. I was a Muslim leader myself and taught how to permeate the infidel Western societies, destroy their cultures from inside, and pave the ground for the establishment of Islamic law. I understand when we open a door wide to Islam, it will mean the degradation of non-Muslims and their life values. For this reason, Islamists have been able to push and create a divided loyalty in the West and have their own ghettos, courts, swimming pools, etc. Not only this, they have also been pushing non-Muslims to follow their Islamic diets. Some Western country governments are pushed to hand over their obituaries to Muslims so animals are killed in an Islamic way, giving minority Muslims access to halal meat everywhere they want. In other words, non-Muslim majorities have to obey the religious traditions of minority, mostly immigrant Muslims in their own motherlands. Islamists have been trying to stamp their Islamic logo of halal on everything in order to Islamize everything. They ignore the rights of the majority and pronouncing openly that the foods prepared by non-Muslim hands are unclean. Ignoring the rights of the majority is contradictory to democracy, but complementary to Shari'a. After the terrorist attack on America on September 11, 2001, demands for my speaking engagements grew rapidly. Eventually, I relinquished my role as the pastor of the Iranian church and became fully immersed in creating an awareness of Islam's agenda. I had never planned to be involved in such a ministry, but after witnessing the progress of Islam in Australia and the West, I could not keep quiet. I felt very obligated to play my role and defend the Western democracy against Islamists whose religious institutions and practices were in conflict with the Western laws and values. Unfortunately, committed Muslims had been successful in acquiring Western taxpayers' dollars and the endorsement of politicians to establish their discriminating principles in many areas. I was able to anticipate the terrible consequences of their initiatives. I had to do my part and wake up people to their subtle approaches. With their subtlety, these Muslims introduced themselves as peace lovers. They took away opportunities from their Western supporters or friends to personally study Islam and see why Islamists couldn't establish peace and a role model democratic society in the entirety of the Middle East. I felt a great responsibility to inform these Muslim supporters and friends. I wanted to encourage them to investigate the principles of Islam so that they could see Islam's history of brutality in Muslim-ruled lands. It won't be any better in non-Islamic countries. Committed Muslims are dangerous people to democracy. Deep in their hearts, they believe that they need to use the freedom in the West in order to permeate societies and subject them to Islam. They believe in one path to freedom. People are free to become Muslim. Muslims are free to make others Muslim. But no one is able to leave Islam or oppose Islam. Freedom is appreciated as long as they have the opportunity to spread their religion and dominate. They forbid non-Muslims from practicing their religions openly and building their churches or temples in Islamic countries. Under the rule of Islam, no other religion's followers should be allowed to spread their beliefs or build new sanctuaries. Only ancient church buildings have remained in Islamic countries, although some were turned into mosques. Before the rise of Islam in Saudi Arabia, there were even churches in Mecca, now the holiest city of Islam. Non-Muslims, particularly Jews and Christians, are not allowed to step into Mecca anymore because it is pronounced holy and non-Muslims are unclean according to Islam. Committed Muslims are very well skilled in abusing and undermining freedom in non-Muslim countries. They can build mosques in every corner of non-Islamic countries, but non-Muslims cannot have a similar right in Islamic countries. Muslims build their mosques and Islamic schools everywhere in the West without a challenge. In fact, some politicians have morally or even financially supported the growth of Islam in the West. In 1994, some Iranians in Sydney complained to the Australian government to stop the building of a mosque financed by the Islamic Republic of Iran. They believed that the mosque would be used as a spy center for the interest of the terrorist government of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Sadly, the Australian government was not able to look deep at this issue, and the mosque was built. Soon after its completion, one of its clerics was suspended for deportation to Iran because of subversive activities. Muslim leaders have been using their oil revenues for the establishment of Islamic tyranny in the West by building mosques, schools, and Islamic centers. Middle Eastern oil has become like a gradual death sentence for Western countries. They use their power, wealth, and tongue in the Zoroastrian Iran, Coptic Egypt, Catholic Syria and Lebanon, and Hindu-Buddhist Indonesia, and made them Islamic. Now they are following the same strategy in the West. Under the pretense of multiculturalism and pluralism, committed Muslims are able to make root and establish themselves stronger for the destruction of freedom. This includes multiculturalism and pluralism. Pluralism is an obstacle under the rule of Islam, but can be used by the minority pious Muslims as a channel until they gain power. The lack of knowledge in the West has given them opportunity to cleverly use the Islamic deceitful principles for spreading their false messages and attaining their religious goals. They have been telling people that Islam supports knowledge and reason. It is a just, merciful, and peaceful religion. It believes in freedom and never imposes itself on others. Yes, there is jihad in Islam, but it is only spiritual and for internal purification. There's also a physical jihad in Islam, which is only defensive and never invasive. Those who fight against Jews in the Middle East are freedom fighters. Islam is the only religion that can liberate nations. It is also the only religion that has liberated women since the rise of humanity. If Islam governs the Western countries, it will be more democratic than the present situation in the West, and so on. We discovered that these statements are just a few examples of their deceits that are widely accepted in the West. Even millions of moderate Muslims in the Islamic countries know that Islam does not have peace with non-Muslims. Female Muslims are second-class citizens. Jews are the number one enemy because they loudly question the prophetic claims of Muhammad. Westerners are still behind in understanding these facts of Islam. Time and time again, I raised questions similar to the following in my conversations with Australians, Europeans, and Americans who look to Islam favorably. Is there any democratic Islamic country in the world which has developed an egalitarian system and tolerated human rights, freedom of speech, and religion? If yes, why has every Islamic country, even the most moderate one among them, made the proselytizing of Muslims illegal? Why can Muslims build their mosques and schools in non-Islamic countries, but non-Muslims are not allowed to have similar rights in Islamic countries? If Islam hasn't been able to produce a democratic country in the world, how can it be a hope for non-Islamic countries? How can it be called equal to other religions and beliefs? Why would many Westerners give a space to the authoritarianism of Islam inside their smooth, participative Judeo-Christian culture? If Islamists were not able to respect the freedom of their own people, how do we expect them to respect freedom in foreign lands? If they are hostile towards their own family members and citizens, how could we as strangers dare to open our doors wide to their way of life? If they have a religious obligation to be hostile to their own nominal Muslim family members and citizens, will they be nice to us? Why do Iraqis, Egyptians, Sudanese, Algerians, Syrians, Jordanians, Palestinians speak Arabic while they are not Arabs by race and did not speak Arabic originally? Wasn't this because Muslims not only wanted to Islamize the natives, but to spread their Arabism among them too? Were Iraq, Egypt, Sudan, Algeria, Syria, Jordan, Palestine, Iran, Spain, and India any threat to Muslims in ancient Saudi Arabia when they invaded these countries? How could these wars be called defensive while Muhammad and his successors wrote to the leaders of these countries and threatened them that they wouldn't be invaded if they believed in Islam and subdued themselves to the rule of Islam? Why does the Quran label non-Muslims as unclean animals or worst of beasts and sanction death for them unless they become Muslim? Is this because of its peaceful nature? Why do committed Muslims reject Jews and Christians 10 times a day during their 5 times daily prayers? What kind of peace can Muslims have with Jews and Christians with such a hateful daily prayer? Everybody in the West needs to find the responses to the above questions in order to understand how and in what ways Islamists have betrayed them in their relationships. Sadly, those who are expected to speak and stand for the truth of Judeo-Christian values in the West against the invasion of Islam not only lack the conviction to be effective, but are also being systematically silenced due to political correctness, altruism, and multiculturalism. Due to all sorts of threats from Islamists, not only do many politicians remain complacent, they have also become an indirect support to terrorist regimes in the Middle East against Israel as a result of their dependency on oil. The Western politicians once listened to the voices of their consciences and put all their zeal into helping Jews to reestablish their government and their promised land, rescuing them from further hatred and massacres, as what happened in Germany and some Islamic countries. But now, after 5 decades, their descendant politicians see the solution in welcoming and strengthening Islam at the cost of Israel and the entire West. Governments have been giving more weight to oil than national security in their lands. For this reason, terrorism has not disappeared but instead grown, for terrorists have become more diligent in the pursuit of their agendas for the destruction of the world. Sadly, many churches and Christians also have chosen to be quiet. They think that their silence will grant them security. They've forgotten their master Jesus, who did not keep quiet against false religions and prophets, but laid his life for the truth. What a shame that many churches have disconnected themselves from their root, replaced their love of God and the diligence of their faith with the relativistic values of the world, and have become irrelevant to the truth. There is a great responsibility on our shoulders to hold to the truth sincerely in order to protect our families and communities from expansionist and dangerous Muslims who have an unlimited appetite for the destruction of our free and democratic values.